So, welcome everybody to Supply Chain Management Unit number 7 Global Sourcing. So, in this unit, we're going to be talking about purchasing things from abroad. So, let's first of all look at the terminology of sourcing. So, first of all, we have what strategic global sourcing. It's really having a plan to go and buy things abroad, right? We cannot just say, well, we just need it from abroad because it's cheaper. No, we have to have a whole strategic plan that says we need to buy abroad. Why? Is it cheaper? Yes, but how about the transportation methods? How about the customs? How about currency fluctuations? We have to consider so many things. So that's why we need a strategy. So in this case, international purchasing is just a term of buying things abroad. Okay, very good. So with that, we're done with that one. And then drivers for buying offshore. Why do I want to buy offshore? First of all, I have requirements for offset. Maybe the country that I want to sell my products in is requiring me to have some certain production in there, or perhaps I cannot import anything from there. So I need to set up my operations in there. Second one, the European Union advertisement. That is, I'm gonna skip it because it's just part of the book because it's British, but I'm not gonna do it. Pressure to reduce cost. Yeah, sometimes we need to buy supplies from cheaper markets or manufacture something where the labor is cheaper. The same thing in the manufacturing flexibility. Also, sometimes when we have a manufacturing in some other places, perhaps we can produce more. Perhaps again, if we have more flexible labor, then we can produce at the times that we need as compared to relying on our own production locally. We also have access to specialist skills. Sometimes in some certain markets, we have specialists. We have a whole industry that is already well developed, so we better go into tag into that expertise rather than trying to develop it in our own market. Then we have market penetration. We want to enter to a center market, so it's give and take. I require you supplies from that country. I sign an agreement, but at the same time, I want to set my operations in there. So it's a one for one. And then finally, we don't have the domestic raw materials. We don't have them domestically, so we need to source them from abroad. So those are mainly the reasons why we do it. We have challenges to international sourcing. So we have just in time may not happen. Why? Because now the logistics are more complex. I don't mean that it's impossible, but it gets more complex. The same thing, finding abroad who really can do it and we can trust them. Logistics in terms of who's gonna do it, whether it's a freight forwarder or how are we gonna do it, whether it's gonna be on time and whether it's gonna cost us more. He also challenges in terms of the culture, the language, also the customs, whether we need to pay more for customs, fluctuation of money. Sometimes it's our benefit, sometimes it's to our disadvantage. We have to pay more for that because probably that economy is doing well. Now also we have to understand the global arena and how to carry out business abroad. We have also problems in terms of international sourcing, in terms of nationalistic. We have that tendency to say that some products are better made in some certain countries or so, and then understanding the political environment, whether that country is open to foreign investment. So we have to think of that. Now, key considerations when sourcing, I already explained a little bit of those ones just before. We talked about political stability. For example, if the arena is open to import or things, we can do it. Cultural language, this may represent a very big problem, especially when we have emerging markets. We want to buy something from that market, but the problem is that we don't speak the language and there's very little to speak that language, and that becomes very troublesome. The same as the culture, maybe they are not too hardworking, or perhaps quality is not a big thing for them, right? So we need to look at those things. The same thing as we said, for example, the duty and customs. Is it going to be more expensive if I buy it abroad because I have to pay a lot of customs and fees for importing? If there's no bilateral agreements within the countries, that becomes a problem because we have to pay more importing fees, right? And then of course we have to think of the contracts, how we deal with them, what are the responsibilities of that country, of that company in that country, whether they are authorities, if there's any risk, if there's any problems. Can the authorities support us or not, or it's a lost case? That happens a lot in some countries, that the government, like for example in China, they will side the Chinese. So if you're an overseas company, you have everything to lose, and you have to make sure how you mitigate that risk. So now let's talk about transportation system. So you decide to buy abroad, so you have options. So road transport whenever it's possible. That's, for example, in the European Union is possible because the boundaries between countries, they are not that high, right? Market entry is relatively low cost. The transportation cost in terms of purchasing the cars or so is not that bad. So that one can be, but however, we have some issues also. Well, I mean, we are flexible in terms that whenever there's bad weather, we can use other routes. So if there's accidents, we can use other routes, but also can have some delays. Second, the rail transport is not that common. Like I said, it can be done in Europe, but in some other countries, it's not that common. Rail transport, only when it fulfills the goals of the company, we will do it. So in this case, also is very expensive, and also packaging is very complex when we do it through rail transport. So usually companies do not rely on rail transportation that much. So now we have sorry, I skipped that one. I skipped the maritime. So in the maritime, we have um this is the most common method. Everyone uses it. In the end, the ports are already set. There's already the commercial lines. Everything is already set up. Freight forwarders already know how to deal with that. So this is somehow the safest. It's not. Is one of the cheaper ones. Is one of the safest ones, but is one of the slowest ones. So that is one of the things. Also, a maritime helps us when it have economies of scales. If we have larger shippings, we can do it because we can use full containers. We have to think of that. Also, we have to think of the ports that it's going to go through, because some ports are very efficient, some other ports are not that efficient. When we look at major ports, for example, Singapore port or Panama port, there are two ports that are very, very well established. They know what they are doing and can be cleared very quickly. However, there are other ports that perhaps not so much. Okay, like Vietnam has a lot of problems with ports, for example. Africa also Africa has a lot of problems with ports, especially there's pirates. Yeah, true story. Not of the Caribbean, but of the African coast. So, anyways, I'll tell you a story about pirates the next time I meet you. So now we have air transportation. Air transportation, very quick. We can do it very quickly, but it's very expensive and also has a lot of issues. Why? In terms of severe weather, it can delay airspace. Also, if the tools, sorry, if the supplies are very dangerous to transport, we will not be able to do it by air. So it has a lot of problems. But whenever we need something very quick, perhaps this will be the best method. So this goes mostly in consideration on the supply that we have, whether choose this method and the quantity as well, because in the end we cannot transport very large quantities. I mean, we can do transportation of containers the same as in the ship, but there's very little airplanes that really manage that volume. There's like what is a Russian Antonov. Antonov is one of them. There, I think there's American version. I don't remember. Hercules, I think. Anyways, they are very, very massive airplanes, and you'll see that really is not that common. Again, shipping is most common one. So now, when we're thinking of international sourcing, we have to think of freight agents or forwarders. Most of the time, we don't do the transportation on our own. What we will do is hire a company that will do it for us. So that those companies are the ones who pick it up, give recommendations of the packaging. Some of them they package but by themselves. They arrange it. They arrange the cargo load, the way it should be loaded, the shoe will be kept, all the documents, and they just do door to door transporting with us sweating it. So we have to know, of course, which are the forwarders that are the best ones. Some forwarders can be very well trusted, some others not, because if they are not very knowledgeable, sometimes the things can be kept in customs for days and they don't clear them and stuff. So here, for example, we can see the video of Kuehne and Nagel. Cunha Nego, this company is one of the largest ones. They know what they're doing, so better go and check how their operations work. Okay. Now we decide to buy abroad, so we have to choose which method of payment that we're gonna do through that people abroad, and this becomes very tricky because everything goes depending on how much we trust the other person, and this goes on relation of the buyer, well, the supplier and the buyer, right? Who has the power? So for example, we can have an open account. In an open account, in this case, we said, okay, give me the supplies and I'll pay you back in a month. There's a very good amount of trust, of course, for the supplier. It's a very big risk because if these guys get my supply and they never pay me, that's a problem for me as a supplier, right? Of course, for the buyers, like, it's good. I can receive it, I can process it, I can even sell it, and then after that I can payment, so that's very comfortable for them. Then we have the bills of collection. Bills of collection is the documents are sent through the buyer's bank, so everything is not sent directly. So everything is done through the bank, and until everything is received, the payment is received, then the bank will release all the documents. So now we have the letters of credit. In the letters of credit, it's very similar to the previous one. However, in this one, the only difference is that the payment is not involved in the payment. The bank is not involved in the payment. They are just holding the documents, but the payments are done directly within the companies. And then lastly, we have the payment in advance. So in this case, we have the payment. Again, the previous two methods is when you don't trust those companies. So you have to rely on an external or a third party in order to oversee the whole payment. And then we have the payment in advance, which is I trust you, so I pay you in advance. Give me the supply, even if I haven't received it yet, but I trust you. So payment in advance and the credit over 30 days. Those ones are when the levels of trust are very high, but when not, we have to use the other letters of credit. And then what method of payment to use? Well, use the one that matches your strategy in terms of the company policy, whether we have the cash flow, whether we trust the other company, what relationship we have with them, whether we have already done a lot of transactions with them, and also whether how do we feel about them. No, that's the list, but of course we also have to trust our God as well. So now, factors influencing success in international sourcing. So how do we ensure that this overseas relationship is gonna be successful? So we have to understand that the management has to be supportive about it. They have to really make sure that it's not the procurement department, it's the company, the whole company is overseeing this process. We have to develop the communication skills. There's no hidden agendas. Everything is crystal clear from the buyer and the supplier. There's no hidden agendas. Establishing long-term relationships. Like I said, it's not good to have a one-night stand. It's always good long-term relationship with the supplier. We need to understand the global opportunities. If there's any markets emerging with a certain supply, we have to take care of them, and then we have to invest on them also. We have to understand whether we have to understand who's the supplier abroad, how they operate, but also if there's any certifications abroad or internationally that can give us a guarantee that they are going to perform in the way that we want. Right? The same thing we can make it successful if we look for consultancy, if there's any companies already dealing in that country, dealing with that company, so they can go and make sure that the whole process it's right or not, so we can look for expert assistance. We also have to make sure that we understand the currency rates, fluctuations, how does that work? And finally, we need to use a proper forwarder. Like I told you, when we have a good forwarder, yes, we're going to pay more, but also we're going to ensure that the things are going to be on time and that everything's going to go smoothly. So we need to consider that in order to be successful. Very good. So that's it for unit number 7. If you have any questions, do let me know. Your quiz is going to be available online. Thank you so much.